Hey everyone, I wanted to hop on here today and talk about something that I don't think I've ever talked about on YouTube. I don't know if I've seen anyone kind of really talk about on YouTube, and that's kind of like our tarot ethics. So, I am going to share in this video a reading that I recently received from someone that I definitely reserve the right to call a bad tarot reading, if that's what it was at all. And I don't want the focus of this video to be necessarily on that experience, but I am going to use that experience to kind of open up dialogue and open up the conversation into our personal tarot ethics. So, from this experience that I had with the reading, it invited me to kind of reflect on the way that I show up to the reading table, both as a reader as well as a client, and kind of decide for myself some tangible things that I want to do moving forward. So that is the focus of the video, even though I am sure I will express my feelings as I go through about why this reading was so terrible. That's not necessarily the focus of this video. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started with giving you a little bit of a story time. So essentially, I went to an event that was hosted somewhere in my community, and at this event we were meant to kind of speed read for each other. So I would read for someone and then they would read for me, and that would happen within a kind of time frame of 10 minutes. So I kind of showed up and I had someone placed across from me, and I was super excited about it because this person has been reading and doing this kind of work for about 40 years. So I was really excited to sit across the table from an experienced practitioner. I was looking forward to kind of breaking in my Lenormand deck. The basic premise of this is just to kind of break in like new decks or break in different styles and just meet other people and kind of practice divination. So I was really excited to be placed across from someone who has so much experience, because I definitely think it is so very valuable for us to learn from other readers. That's one of the core tenets of my experience as being a tarot reader, is like learning from other readers. So I walked into it with like a lot of hope and a lot of excitement. So I do the reading for him, and he asked me to read about his finances because he's in a really tough spot. He can't pay his bills. I promise you that's important in just a second. That's why I included that detail. And so I gave him an actionable step, which could be accomplished within like 5 minutes, because we were meant to keep our readings to a short time frame, and kind of like one thing that he could do to improve his circumstances. So the tables kind of were turned, and he went to go read for me. And he tells me to start off with that he doesn't really necessarily read the cards, he reads energy. And I said, okay, cool. I said, I think that's totally fine. I'm here to learn from you, and I'm excited to kind of get to experience your different style and your kind of unique way of doing things. So he asked me which question I wanted to seek an answer for, and I asked him how I could embrace this momentum. I've been feeling a lot of momentum lately, creatively, energetically, emotionally, mentally. Like, I'm in an uplifted position. I'm enjoying life. So how can I keep embracing this momentum and capitalize on it? So I asked him what I considered to be a very specific question, something that could easily be done within a 5-minute time period. So he goes and he asked me to pull 14 cards. And I was like, okay, that's a lot for 5 minutes, but everyone has different reading styles. I mean, I know people who can do 1 card in 5 minutes, and some people do 20 cards in 5 minutes. So that wasn't really a red flag for me. So I pulled the cards for myself and I laid them out. And then he kind of rearranged them in a way that he said made sense. Literally taking kind of groupings and like rearranging them around. So I thought that was kind of interesting because I'd never seen that done before, but at that point I was just kind of like ready to experience the different style. Well, the first thing he does is he looks at me and he tells me that I'm not living up to my full potential, that I'm living a double life. I have a private life, I have a public life, yada, 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 which is totally true considering, first off, we all do, but second off, like my profession, whatever. So that's not directly related to the question I asked, but I'm just kind of rolling with it at this point. And then he says immediately, and all of this happens within 30 seconds, that the only way for me to unlock my potential is to take his Reiki class. that he is hosting at this place, and it is my responsibility to step up to the plate and learn how to unlock myself energetically and become the healer I'm meant to be. Like, I'm verbatim saying what he fucking said by taking his class. So I told him the truth, which was that my mother-in-law is a Reiki practitioner, and I always promised her that if I was interested in exploring Reiki, I would learn from her because I want to learn from my family lineage. And at that point, he was like, okay, that makes sense. And he just kind of kept going along with the reading. And I thought that was kind of it. It really fucking was a red flag that he advertised his reading in the middle. He advertised his product in the middle of the reading, especially after we had just done a reading for him about his finances. And he told me that if he didn't have people sign up for this particular class he was teaching, he wouldn't be able to pay his bills. So already there was kind of like a sense of urgency there, and like definitely kind of giving scam, because that's what it felt like. And you know, if it looks like a duck, we're gonna call it a duck. So he continues on reading for me, and as he reads, he says something along the lines of like, he laid out the cards. Like I said, I had laid them out and then he rearranged them in a way that he saw fit. And he started to say, like, this set of cards is like for your professional career. This is for your like business. This is for your personal. This is for your home. Like, he had all of these different kinds of domains that I didn't quite understand. I also didn't understand the distinction between like career and personal, and also career and professional, as well as like business, because there were like 3 words that were very similar. But at this point, we only had like 3 minutes left to go, so I was just kind of rolling with it. I was like, okay, whatever. So he continues going, and he kind of looks at me and he's like, so you have a business partner? Yes. And I was like, no, I don't have a business partner. And he's like, so you have someone who controls your finances? And I was like, no, I don't. I'm financially independent. I don't have anyone who controls my finances. Like, even my husband and I have split finances. And like, he kept like feeding me the reading, but at the end of each question he would be like, yes, right, correct. Like, he wanted me to fall for this reading like hook, line, and sinker. And I really didn't feel like I could put a hard no in its place because of the timing. Like, the situation was just really weird. It was a free reading. If like I was paying for it, I probably would have been like a lot more vocal. I was like, I'm just gonna fucking let this continue, because like I just want this to be over. So he kind of like made me really reflect on like a couple different things there, but I'm going to keep going with my story. So then he pulls for the current position Fool, Death, and 4 of Cups reversed. But it was in the other order. It was 4 of Cups reversed, Death, and it was Fool. And he goes to talk to me about how I've been experiencing like a great sense of boredom and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, sure. I was like, I can definitely see how the 4 of Cups can like mean boredom. He's like, oh no, I'm not reading the cards, I'm reading the energy. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, I can definitely see how that could mean that. I was like, but for me personally, the 4 of Cups reversed means that I'm coming out of a period of depression. You know, like, if you want the actual fucking answer, that's what I'm gonna give you, because I know that for a fact. And he looked at me and he said that I wasn't depressed, I was bored, which you're not a psychologist, you're not a psychiatrist actually, so okay. And that my boredom essentially could be corrected by his Reiki class. So once again, this is how I said, like, was it really a reading? So I really was so pissed off at this point, because like it didn't really connect. Like, I had a lot of red flags that were going on in my mind, but it didn't really connect until I came home and I reflected on it and like wrote about it, that like he was overstepping boundaries that I would never overstep as a tarot reader. Then to top it all off, we have about 30 seconds left, and he looks at me and he says, you have someone in your family that's going to be hospitalized soon. And I said, yeah. I said, maybe. I said, my husband's getting wisdom teeth surgery, my dad's having carpal tunnel surgery, like minor surgeries for the most part. I was like, so maybe. And he's like, well, they're going to be in the hospital and they're going to die. And I was filled with so much fucking rage at that point because so many of my boundaries had been overstepped, like start to finish. But let's pretend this was a real reading. Let's pretend, because I want us to have a takeaway from this, right? The point of this video is not to talk about necessarily the bad reading, but the way we conduct ourselves as readers when we show up. It is completely 1000% possible that this person, like I said, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a fucking duck, right? But let's pretend like this has any sense of legitimacy. I was already kind of thinking about this because I had a client come to me that when I did a reading at a vintage store a few weeks ago, she came to me and she said, I'm really scared to get a tarot reading. My brother got murdered and we hired a medium. And when I was speaking to the medium, she told me in excruciating detail what the next 30 years of my life would be. So this woman sits down at my table and she visibly is so uncomfortable. And I was like, are you sure? Is everything okay? I was very patient. She's like, no, I need to get over my fear of this. She's like, but don't read predictively. And I looked at her and I said, absolutely. I said, I will not do that. I promise you that. And she told me that when that woman read predictively for her in that context, that she felt like her next 30 years of her life had been taken away from her. And then when it became true, she felt that even more so. So I think it really kind of goes down to the concept of a tarot reading is one of the most intimate things we can possibly do. One of the most intimate things we can possibly ever do. Let's go ahead and pretend that he actually was reading my future and he actually did see that. What is the point of telling your client they're going to experience a death in the next couple months? What is the point? What are they supposed to do with that information? What was the point of my client receiving information she was going to, what's the point? Just because we receive information does not necessarily mean that we have a responsibility to tell it in that time without any context, any filter, any warning. And the only thing that I can even possibly think of is that perhaps in the case of the medium as well as the guy that I was getting a reading from, that possibly it's possible for people to go into a trance state. But I think if you are someone who gets into those states when you are reading, my mother-in-law, for one of them, she knows that she gets into states like this. She says to people, hey, I lose my sense of self during the reading. Sometimes I say things that I don't even remember later. Sometimes I'm just intuitively flowing. I think if we are those types of people and we are those types of readers, because 9 out of 10 times I would say those types of people have done it consistently enough to where they know who they are and how they read and what that experience is for them. If they truly have that capacity, they have the responsibility to, without a doubt, convey that to their clients. Because at the end of the day, people have the right to determine, especially in the case of me and the case of other people who go in for a very specific reading, how can I capitalize on the moment I'm feeling? That has nothing to do with anything in the future, with prediction, with hospitals, with deaths, anything. That has nothing to do with that. So I fail to understand in any context in which that is appropriate. And so I guess that is my hard line that I wanted to kind of draw with that. Is like, it's less so much more of a rant, but like more of a calling that if we are delivering types of information to people, we need to be responsible with it. And like I said, I just think we can do better, So it made me really reflect on my personal etiquette. Because one, I'm not going to advertise products during a reading. What the fuck? I'm not going to do that. Especially after telling people my financial situation, I'm not going to fucking do that. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a fucking duck. But also, if a client tells me they understand what a card means, who the fuck am I to say that's not what that means? Sure, stand on your intuition and be like, maybe they don't know it yet, Maybe they don't see it yet. Maybe it's what they believe and it's what I believe. Fine, whatever. If you really get that heavy of a gut punch, I do appreciate it when you tell me, hey, I'm really feeling this. And I'll take it into consideration. But it was all of the other shit too that really kind of threw me off. But like, let's just say that I had a 2-year-old walk up to my desk and they were receiving a tarot reading, and the 2-year-old looked at the fish in the Page of Cups and laughed and said, "This fish is to remind me to laugh more." Like, who am I to tell that 2-year-old that that message is wrong? Especially in the case of when we're conducting a reading and we pick the cards for ourselves. You know, like, at the end of the day, I do think at all points when I read, like, if a client looks at me and says, I know what that card means, I'm going to look back and I'm going to say, of course you do. You know, this reading is for you. This is your reading. Of course you know what it means because you have intuition too. At no point am I ever going to look a client in the face and completely undermine and dismantle something that they feel so sure about. And I do understand that, like, there's a possibility, you know, for example, I'll give you this. This is a humanizing example, I guess. I got my very first tarot reading in New Orleans probably about 10 years ago. And the woman looked at me and she said, "You give way too much of yourself to other people." And I said, "No, I don't." And then a few years later, I realized that woman was really fucking right. You know, sometimes we're not in the place to receive the message. So I do recognize maybe that 4 of Cups did mean boredom. But to look me dead in the face and tell me, no, that's not the feeling you were experiencing. That's not what you were going through. And completely undermine all of my experiences and try to reframe that within a 3-minute period. We're not going to do that. And we're not going to let that happen without speaking out on that. You know, if someone tells you they mean something or they know something, if a client tells you, I know what that card means, just like, let them talk, you know? So I think another thing is to, if you can't answer their question, you can just say that. You know, you don't have to read on a variety of other matters. You don't have to do that. Like, I get that sometimes we sit down and, like, the client thinks that they're getting a relationship reading, but they're really getting like a self-esteem reading. Sure, I think that's fine. But I think it's important for us to vocalize that and say, hey, I really want to answer your question, but that's not what's coming through right now. Instead, this is what's coming through, and it's coming through much stronger, you know? And that is something that I do in my readings if I feel like that is pertinent, if I feel like that is necessary. I also have told clients before that, hey, I know you would like an answer to this question, but I feel like I can't provide you that answer, or I feel like you have to kind of go and live it. I don't feel like it can be told to you yet. I have told that to people. I have received that as an answer. I think all of that is fine. What I don't think is fine is to completely change the topic, especially in such an extreme direction of, hey, someone you love is going to die in 2 months. Whatever. Let's pretend like this is an outlier example. To essentially dodge the fact that you didn't answer their question, you know? I think that not all tarot readings have to give more answers than questions. I like it when my tarot readings give me questions, but like, if I can't answer the questions, I'm just going to say that honestly. And then, like I said before, I think it's really important that we ask open-ended questions. Part of what made this experience feel so disgusting and disheartening and a violation of my energy, to put it very softly and to put it lightly, is that, like, I think it's really important that when we sit down in the reading table, we are creating a safe space and a sacred space. Tarot reading is really fucking intimate, and I feel like people say that, but I don't know if I don't know if we say that enough, right? Like, it is a very intimate experience. So I am never going to give a reading and be like, Is this correct? Yes. Yes. Right. Correct. Yes. Like, I'm never going to lead the reading in that direction, because you are essentially pigeonholing your client in a way to where they cannot have an open dialogue with you. You know, I think it's really important that we sit down and we ask ourselves, how do we want our clients to feel when they leave our table? Do we want them to feel impressed with our stream of consciousness and our assertions? Or do we want them to feel safe and held and feel like they have experienced a moment that is sacred and intimate in a way that doesn't feel like a violation of their energy? And I guess that's really kind of what it comes down to. I feel like that was way too long. It's probably because I'm filming at 8 o'clock at night. But I promised myself that I wasn't going to censor this. I also promised myself that I was going to fucking film it, because it's so different from the content that I usually create. But like I said, I don't want this just to be like a negative space, like rant. Like, I want this to be an open dialogue of the way we approach tarot, you know? And I think that, like, what I really learned from this as a recipient of the reading is that it is possible that much of what I'm critiquing is his personal reading style, though, like I said, was it a reading? I still have questions. But even though some of what I'm criticizing could be chalked up to his style, I think that we have a responsibility to consider not only what we're saying, but the person receiving it. And that feels really significant to me right now. So what did I learn as someone approaching a reading? Because I think I started that point and I never finished. I think I lost a little bit of my rose-colored glasses from this experience. Not everyone approaches tarot in the same way I do. And so I think it's really important that when I go to readings, now I know to say, hey, if something comes up that is really significant in the future, please don't tell me. Like, actually, don't read for the future at all. I don't want to know about it. I don't. I'm not saying that it can't be done. I just want to not think about that. You know, I want to live my life organically, you know? And so I think it's important that when I sit down to the table, I say that to individuals. I also think it's really important that, like, I ask people and say, hey, if you get into what I consider to be a trance state, a very intuitive flow, and you kind of lose sight of yourself and you kind of lose sight of what you're saying and all of that stuff, like, you know, I need to know that going in so I can mentally prepare for what's coming. And so I will definitely state that. You know, I know people like that who read that way. And I'm not saying that that's an invalid way of reading, but I am saying that I think if that is our style of reading, we owe it to our clients to say that, but with full transparency. But also, as readers, I think it's also not our responsibility, because I still think the responsibility lies on the person doing the reading, but I do think it would be wise for us to have in our awareness that some people are like that, and it's worth going to the table and saying, hey, if you read like this, I need to know so I can have informed consent, or give informed consent, is what I'm going to say. So I've recorded this a lot of times. You see how late it is? I'm not even going to turn on the light, because when I started filming, there was light out, and now there's no light out. But even though this was only like 25 minutes long or whatever, I had to fucking say what I had to fucking say. And I'm gonna fucking post it, because if TarotTube is my place where I can show up organically and authentically, if this is a place where I can chronicle my experience as a tarot reader, as I grow, as I develop, as I shift, then I need to be able to post this content and say, fuck it. Here it is. Take it or leave it. This is my experience. And I hope that this kind of opens up a dialogue, whether within this community or even within our own minds, of like, what do we expect when we get a reading? But like, what are our tarot ethics? You know, we obviously probably know why we're doing this, but like, I think it's really important that we also contemplate how we're doing this. And so I hope that that purpose comes clear with this, is that like, I still of course feel rather bitter about the experience as it happened to me. I reserve the right to call that a really shitty reading, because it fucking was. I also reserve the right to say that part of it was my innocence. I reserve the right to say that part of it could be possibly different reading styles. I reserve the right to say that all of that can exist within one space. But more importantly, like, I call us to call people out on this, I guess. And also, like, set really strong ethics for ourselves so that we can be treated like the professionals we deserve to be treated like. And also, we don't do more fucking damage than we are doing good. Like, it's really fucking simple, you know? Don't do more damage than you're doing good. I feel like it's pretty easy. So I'm not going to drag this video out anymore, but I'm gonna wrap it up. That's it. So this is what I learned from my experience. And I guess that's the big takeaway, is that I'm not going to give credence to the reading. I get to decide what resonates with my life. I get to decide what does not resonate with my life. Whatever the fuck that was did not resonate with my life. But it does give me room to reflect and to grow, and to hopefully also start dialogue that I think is really desperately needed within this space. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up. I hope that all of you have a really good day. That's it. I'm exhausted, but I hope that all of you have a great day. And I do want to go ahead and say, you know, thank y'all for being here, like I always say.